Hi, I'm Dr. Jeremy Neal. I'm a professor of philosophy at Houston Baptist University. I want to talk today about St. Thomas Aquinas and his theory of law. Aquinas defined the law as having four different components. So a reasonable, acceptable, legitimate law is one that contains an element of reason. It is made by a proper authority, someone who has care of the community. It is made for the common good. That's the third element. And it must be promulgated. That means it must be publicly announced. Aquinas, having defined law in this way, in his famous treatise on law, which is part of the Summa Theologiae, it occurs in the Prima Secunda of the Summa Theologiae, he divides law into several different kinds. So, for instance, there is eternal law. God is the author of eternal law, and these are the laws by means of which God orders the universe. Through eternal law, God structures the planets, the stars, the galaxies. So definitely eternal law encompasses what we would call the laws of nature or scientific principles. That part of the eternal law which pertains to human beings is the natural law. So the natural law is that set of moral principles which all persons know because God has given it to all persons. Aquinas thinks that the Apostle Paul confirms this in Romans 1. Aquinas thinks that all persons have a basic knowledge of morality, unless they, of course, through sin and ignorance, manage to obstruct their knowledge of that morality. But you can find, in his view, in all human cultures, some basic interpretation of that morality. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Aquinas also thinks that there's such a thing as divine law. By following the natural law, it is possible for human beings to attain our earthly end, our terrestrial goal, and we can be happy, at least in a modified sense, by obeying the constituents of the natural law. But it is only through the divine law that we are capable of achieving our celestial goal, our supernatural end. And Aquinas thinks that only when we operate in accordance with the constituents of the divine law, which is made available to us by God's special revelation, do we become capable of flourishing in the full and complete and eternal sense which we were created to flourish in. So let me briefly divide divine law into two kinds. Aquinas says in the treatise on law that there's an old divine law and a new divine law. Old divine law is found in the Old Testament and corresponds to the Old Covenant. New divine law is found in the New Testament and corresponds to the New Covenant. The Israelites living under the Old divine law believed that it was by means of the blood of bulls and goats and sheep and so forth that they were saved, or that their sins were forgiven. When in fact, Aquinas argues, that Old Covenant was merely a symbol or a representation of the New Covenant, which is really what forgave their sins. So Christ, who died for the sins of human beings on the cross, is the centerpiece of the New Covenant, and it is by believing in the salvific work of Christ that persons are capable of attaining their supernatural end through the workings of the divine law. The New Covenant, then, the new divine law, has replaced the Old Covenant in Aquinas' mind. It has displaced the Old Covenant, the Old Divine Law, with an understanding of law that enables all human beings who will accept it to achieve that eternal goal of heavenly beatitude. There's also positive law or human law, which is that body of law which is laid down by a particular country. So I live in the state of Texas right now, and there are certain laws of the state of Texas, such as driving on the right side of the road and stopping at traffic lights. Disobeying these laws will incur punishment. Aquinas says that most of the time the laws of human states, like the state of Texas, correspond to the natural law. But sometimes they don't. And it is in the particular circumstances in which they don't correspond or sync up very well with the natural law that it is possible to identify some special and distinguishing features of the natural law which are especially interesting as components of Aquinas' theory of morality. But I'll talk more about that in another lecture.